This is why I joke and say, American capitalists think in weeks, but the Chinese government thinks in decades and centuries. Let's move on. So this is a very good piece from Richard Wolff, who is going to be talking about the immediate impacts of tariffs and what the sole purpose of these tariffs are, and why the UAW's assessment on it is perhaps a little too hopeful, and maybe perhaps a little too hopeful, and maybe a lot more damaging to the American economy. Let's take a look.
This is Democracy Now. Presenting a 10% prevailed, the biggest hike in global tariffs in modern U.S. history, including a 10% blanket tariff on all imported goods from about 185 countries. In addition, many U.S. trading partners, including the European Union, China, and Japan, will see even higher tariffs. China now faces a total 54% tariff. Trump announced the plan during a speech in the Rose Garden at the White House.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered.
Yeah. By the way, Dow dropped 1,680 in its biggest wipeout since 2020 as fears from fallout from tariff shake markets, and S&P 500 sinks 4.8%.
There's the day American industry was reborn.
Yeah, based. Well. Oh, no. I hate when you're right. I'm sorry, chatter.
The day America's destiny was reclaimed.
Yeah.
And the day that we began to...
Liberation. Yeah.
Make America wealthy again. Gonna make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steelworkers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen. We have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream.
The impact of Trump's tariffs are expected to be felt around the world. While Trump claims the tariffs will boost the U.S. economy, many economists fear it could lead to a recession or worse. Trump's trade war could also shift global alliances as countries seek new trading partners. China, Japan, South Korea have already announced plans to increase trading ties and
Here, I'll play this. So
monetary barriers.
I'll play this so you guys, for all the Asmongold refugees, because he's not streaming today, so you don't feel left out, okay? And you can give me notes on whether or not I was able to do a decent one.
5 tariff. Think of that, 2.5% on foreign-made automobiles. The European Union charges us more than 10% tariffs, and they have 20% VATs, much higher. India charges 70%, and perhaps worst of all are the non-monetary restrictions imposed by South Japan. Our Ford sells very little.
Talking about Canada.
But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen.
Yeah.
And they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
Damn.
Thank you.
Holy shit.
Brian, I'd like to have you come up here for a second, okay? I just see him sitting. He's been a fan of ours, and he understands this business a lot better than the economists, a lot better than anybody.
Bold.
Brian, say a few words, please, would you?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
President.
It's a great honor to have you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I grew up just north of Detroit, Michigan. In my time, plants sitting idle. We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%, Mr. President.
Or 12 years.
This is remarkable. Dude, if I was Ben Shapiro, I'd be Brian Kilmeeing, dude. It is quite remarkable. Like, his input is just going, over a Trump seminar here. He's putting on a clinic. Ben Shapiro and his nerd ass has to sit there and like defend these decisions in the nerdiest ways possible, even though he's wrong. And so is Asmongold, but he's wrong in an infinitely more popular way. It's awesome. I want to look at, I wonder if my editors posted my reaction to this already. Let's see how I covered this, if it's out already. It's tariff time. It's Liberation Day, folks.
Tariffs on imported products are taxed.
Of a recession now?
I did, Steve.
You can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance. Tariff of 34%. I think
we should have just let it ride. We should have just let it ride. That's the problem here. It is so funny.
Very tough, very, very tough trade.
You can just put any number you want on there once you add those.
European Union, very friendly.
Once you add that as a reasoning, everything is a tariff.
39%. We're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half.
Such good input. Yes, it is actually good input because I'm directly undermining what the initiative is here. Okay, that is good input because I'm describing to you why those numbers are incorrect. Next day upload, so delayed. Okay, true.
Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it.
We had all of it.
Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan.
He's out of his mind.
Very, very tough. Great people.
Hey, yo!
And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that oval.
Why was the Taiwan part driving you crazy? I'm dumb. Because slapping tariffs on Taiwan while recognizing it as a separate state from China is a hilarious thing to do because Taiwan has incredibly important strategic positioning for us. It is the chip manufacturing hub for the Western world, and slapping tariffs on the chip manufacturing hub of the Western world that is slammed in the ass cheeks of China at a time when they would be pushed into reunification over collaborating with the United States of America is idiotic. It not only in the short term destroys the GPU prices and prices of everything pretty much, okay, but also it ruins America's interest. It ruins America's strategic interest in Taiwan because America wants to use Taiwan as a weapon against China. It destroys long-standing American foreign policy. It makes no sense. It undermines the it's the DPP, right? You have the KMT, which is now in favor of unification, ironically enough, and you have DPP, which is in favor of separation. It undermines at the domestic level in Taiwan the influence of the power that the DPP has because now they look like assholes. They look like douchebags. They're like, yeah, no, we have to separate from China. KMT is not in favor of unification. Yes, it is.
We're paying
what do
them
you mean?
Billions of dollars.
Put the hat on. That's how you know I'm apolitical. Anyway, we should just be ripping the raw reacts, I think, in an expeditious manner. I wonder if that would do better numbers overall instead of trying to effort post and make a highly edited production. Can you be more normal, man? My boss came in while you were singing the damn China anthem, and now I have a meeting with her and HR on Monday. I'm in Taiwan. I spoke with a bunch of people in the streets, and unfortunately, TSM is not a big part of everybody's mind, so they think of the tariffs as a non-factor. It would be odd if they were the only, if that was the only country that's being slapped with tariffs that don't think of the tariffs as a significant factor.
Coordinate their response to Trump's tariffs. We begin today's show with Richard Wolff, professor of economics emeritus, University of Massachusetts Amherst, visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs at the New School. He's the founder of Democracy at Work and hosts a weekly national TV radio program called Economic Update, the author of a number of books, including most recently Understanding Capitalism and The Sickness is the System, when capitalism fails to save us from pandemics or itself. Professor Wolff, it's great to have you with us again. Well, start off by responding to, and were you surprised, shocked, or do you guess that, well, about 185 countries were going to see increased or tariffs?
On the one hand, we knew something like this was coming. On the other hand, the sweep and the scope of it does make you stop. Mr. Trump is right. It is a changing moment in American history and world history. But I think his representation of what's going on is completely fantastical and has only to do with the self-promotion that he is engaged in most of the time. It was never foreigners who did it to us. This notion of the United States as a victim, we have been one of the greatest beneficiaries in the last 50 years of economic wealth, particularly for people at the top just like him. It has nothing to do with foreigners taking advantage of us. This attempt to make himself strong and powerful relative to others, to blame the foreigner, these are cheap shots that a real president wouldn't do. And there's the most important point. The American economy is in trouble. The American empire is in decline. We don't want to discuss it in this country. We engage in denial, and instead we are striking out at other people, a sad way of handling a decline. The British Empire declined before us, so did all the others. We are now at that point. We had a great 20th century. 21st century is different. You have to face those problems. That's not being done. What's being done is to say we have difficulties, but they're all somebody else's fault, and we're going to solve it by punishing them. I would like to point out, as you suggest quite rightly, Amy, that the rest of the world is not going to sit by. The United States does not have the power it had in the 20th century. It is not in the position it's.
I'm sure Trump has a robust reindustrialization campaign plan and not just tariffs, right? Surely Trump has thought this through. Yeah. Except, given the runway of rebuilding American industrial output, you would have to probably do that years ahead of time before you implemented the tariffs. It would also require a tremendous amount of government power. And considering that Donald Trump is simultaneously undermining expenditures, cutting costs with Doge, and destroying the administrative state, it doesn't seem like they're moving in that direction. This is just breaking things, breaking them fast, with no conceptualization of how we will get out of this problem at all. It would take, at minimum, even if America tomorrow decided to operate like China, central planning, tremendous amount of control over American industry, and decided to implement like martial law style Defense Production Act. Like, there are some tools in the tool belt that presidents can use, right? They do a Defense Production Act across the board. They're like doing eminent domain. They're building this robust network of commerce internally, creating manufacturing hubs and whatnot. Ironically enough, it would still take at least 5 to 10 years to build the underlying infrastructure necessary to become a manufacturing hub in this country. They're not doing that, because you want to know who was doing that, but also doing it in a neoliberal fashion? Joe Biden. That's the irony here. Joe Biden with the CHIPS Act and Joe Biden with like Build Back Better was a watered down version of what is necessary for Trump to do if he were to bring back manufacturing to the United States of America. Both fall short of what is necessary, however, because both are the classic American bind of doing a public-private partnership rather than building all of this stuff ahead of time with government expenses and just controlling these key sectors, maintaining the control over these key sectors in the hands of the government with a federal jobs program, with a federal jobs guarantee. This would require tremendous nationalization. They will not do that. The Brandon administration didn't do that, and it fell short of what was necessary. And the Trump administration is not even doing that and just simply breaking shit. That's it. That's it. It took China, a country with tremendous control over its economy, decades to get to this point. Now, China's material conditions are different than the United States of America, of course. We are a wealthier country, but there are some disadvantages there to being a wealthier country in terms of like building shit as fast as possible. But capital ownership and control over the government is calcified in this country, they will not stand by and allow any leadership to just say, oh, no, you're done. It's over. Your super profits are done. We are now working on building the American industrial base. It's going to be a decade of prosperity. They won't do that. They'll just assassinate you.
Seems to imagine itself when the Secretary of the Treasury added to Mr. Trump's comments that he warned the rest of the world not to retaliate. That would imply that if they do, there would be escalation. Yes, he said, there will be escalation. Well, nothing will guarantee more escalation than if they do nothing, because then it's an invitation to Mr. Trump to keep doing it as each of these efforts doesn't work.
Given how dramatic this was yesterday, is it possible he was deciding this to the very last second as they put this off? And explain exactly. You're a professor, you're a teacher. Most people don't even realize how tariffs work.
Okay. A tariff is a tax. It's just a particular tax that got that name. It used to be called import duty. All it means is when something comes into the United States that was produced outside and is brought in to be sold, it has to pay a tax, as literally as it crosses our border into our country. It is paid by the American company that brings it in, which may pass it on to the consumer, usually what happens, and the tax goes to Uncle Sam. It goes to Washington. Mr. Trump loved to suggest that tariffs were paid by the others, a little bit like Mexico would pay for the wall. Never happened. It's not going to happen here either. It's an American tax. And there's something remarkable that clues you into how big a change.
Wolf defending neoliberalism? No, he's not defending neoliberalism. I think Richard Wolff is simply defending basic economics and how it works and how it will unfold with the Trump administration's initiatives. Richard Wolff is not a defender of free trade principles. He's not a defender of neoliberal economics. He's just explaining to you what is going to happen. That's it. And he's correct. This is going to happen. It's important for you to understand that this will happen. It's not even like reading the tea leaves. Factually describing systems as neoliberalism. Some chatters are too brain broken to be allowed to type. Exactly. Factually describing a neoliberal system is not neoliberalism. It's just what is happening and what will happen. He is a Marxian economist, chatters.
This is that the Republican Party, which has branded itself as the anti-tax party for a century, is now imposing the most massive tax imaginable. Why this big change? Because we have big, big problems, and this kind of slapping the rest of the world is an attempt to solve a little bit of them, but it is not going to work because we don't have the power to do it anymore.
I want to go to UAW President Shawn Fain, who supports Trump's new tariffs, saying last week, "We applaud the Trump administration for stepping up to end the free trade disaster that's devastated working-class communities for decades." Fain spoke Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation.
We've seen over 90,000 manufacturing facilities leave the United States. We've seen, in the Big Three alone in the last 20-plus years, 65 plants have closed. And so, look, tariffs aren't the total solution. Tariffs are a tool in the toolbox.
This is very important for people to understand. Just like with rent control is not a solution. Rent control is simply a tool in the toolbox. And if you use only one tool in the toolbox and not the other tools in the toolbox, then all you'll do is break. Let's say inside of your toolbox, you have a hammer, you have nails, okay? You have wood, and you want to rebuild something. If you just use the hammer, then you broke it. Trump basically, with these tariffs, is simply hammering the shed that existed and not trying to rebuild it at all. The part that I disagree with Shawn Fain on, and, peace be upon him, Shawn Fain, our loyal soldier, okay, I love him, as you guys know, is the part where he is, I think, too hopeful about these initiatives because Trump very clearly is not using other tools
to get these companies to do the right thing, and the intent behind it is to bring jobs back here. and invest in the American workers. If they're going to bring jobs back here, they need to be life-sustaining jobs where people can make a good wage, a living wage, have adequate health care, and have a retirement security, and not have to work 7 days a week or multiple jobs just to scrape to get by paycheck to paycheck.
Well, while UAW President Shawn Fain praised Trump's tariffs, he also said he had great concerns about President Trump's move to eliminate contracts for 700,000 federal workers, the firing of workers at the National Institute of Health and other agencies.
I was a bit disappointed. I like Shawn Fain, many of us do. But this was disappointing. To say, basically, I will support the president because he does something that might help my union, even though Shawn Fain knows, as most economists do, that if you put a tax on the goods coming in, they will go up in price because we have to pay that tax now. And that will lead to domestic producers able to raise their prices because their competitors from abroad are stuck with this tax. So we expect a boost to inflation, which is...
No, this is not internal union politics within the UAW. You're wrong. No, this is a union leader who does stand to benefit from the boosting of domestic manufacturing of cars, especially defending on principle the breaking of free trade, which has gutted this country's labor force and its manufacturing capabilities. He's not. This isn't like a Sean O'Brien style situation where he's hitting on like the culture war aspect of Donald Trump's administration and talking about that positively as though that has anything to do with the material realities that are facing the American working class. It does not. And it's also incorrect, I think. Like his assessment, I think, is probably not going to, his assessment is not going to be true in the long run or even in the short term.
Going to hurt the working class of this country in a very serious way, especially if it builds on itself, which often happens when you do tariffs like this.
Yeah, this is important. This is another aspect of this that's important because, hey, guess what? Trump could also implement price controls. You have so many good tags. I don't know why you're against free trade, because free trade is not free. Free trade almost entirely benefits the capital owning class. They have designed trade agreements to literally destroy the American labor force. Free trade would work if like basic needs across the board at the international level was met. Free trade is not free. And there was a time and place when Democrats, at least some Democrats, were against this principle. And it's crazy to me that they are the ones who are defending it tooth and nail now. Free trade is not free. It's simply not free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as free trade. What about the developing world? Please don't come in here with World Trade Organization assessments about how free trade has actually trickled up and have been able to really boost domestic, these global South populations. The only country where it has actually boosted, the only country where quote unquote free trade policies have actually yielded tremendous bounty is China. That is the reason why, that's the entire reason why Trump is trying to break free trade agreements right now, because they've become a competitor to the United States of America. And the only reason why China was able to do that is not because of the foreign capital entering the marketplace, but instead because they took all of that bounty and engaged in even development and rapid urbanization. No, I'm not going to say India. Are you crazy? India is the greatest example of it not actually working. The reason why it worked in China is not because money came into China. It's because of central planning. It's that simple. You'd make a good teacher for children who like being bullied. And no, it didn't help in Mexico either. It literally didn't help in Mexico until recently, because if you don't have redistributive policies in the nation that is in the nation that's receiving all of this foreign capital, if you don't have a solid approach, if you don't have an approach that has a long-term development project in mind with redistributive policies that focuses on building infrastructure, you don't actually have the Chinese prosperity. Mexico's rise in the last decade comes from Morena, the Morena party, changing a previous longstanding Mexican policy that didn't do that. The examples that you can use are China or Vietnam, and China and Vietnam, to varying degrees, have similar approaches to this.
I want to remind everyone, including Sean Fain, that the auto workers also represent workers in places that need export markets, that produce in America and sell abroad. When those countries retaliate, as they likely will, we will lose export markets, and that will mean fewer jobs.
Important to remember, China did it while still creating a rich elite class. It's not like they did communism. Every single person, especially in the Xi Jinping period, the rich elite class in China is no different than the idea of like owning your own land in China. It's on a government lease, okay? All of your wealth as a rich elite class member in China, especially since the anti-corruption initiative set forth by Xi Jinping in the last decade, is just simply the government's money that you're holding on to. It's like saying, "Hey, let me get a whiff of that $1 billion, please." That's it. And there are many examples of the government coming in and seizing your assets. It's no different than the 100-year mortgage that everyone has. Not a mortgage, but like all land is owned by the government. Okay, it is collectively owned in China. When you purchase a home in China, you don't pay property taxes, but you get a 100-year lease, and they usually extend that lease. Obviously, they don't seize it after the 100-year lease is over. Similar structure in Singapore as well. Singapore has other issues on top of that, though, especially with like immigrant labor forces and the two-tier citizenship structure that they have that resembles almost like the UAE slavery, the slave immigration structure. But I'm not going to get into all of that. I'm simply saying in China, all of the super wealthy and the wealth that they've accrued, especially under Xi Jinping, because this changed a little bit, is directly still controlled by the government. This is precisely the reason why companies like BYD are not operating at the behest of profit margins and improving their profit margins, but can take the initiative, take government subsidies, and offer incredibly low-cost alternatives to the pre-existing domestically manufactured vehicles in European markets. If they were hyper-focused on profits, then they wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't be able to sell you EVs, for example, for like $15,000. They'd be like, what the do you mean? This is an incredibly costly vehicle to make.
And no one, let me stress, no one now knows whether the jobs lost from this trade war will be greater or smaller than any jobs that are gained. It is a big risk being taken by Mr. Trump, and if it doesn't go well, it'll be very bad for the American economy. It will produce the recession folks are worried about, because if the prices go up, people buy less, and that loses jobs.
Yeah.
When you look at all of this, this is an incredibly risky effort to blame the world, punish the world, and then cross his fingers, which is what he's doing, hoping it comes out all right. Reminds me of the football metaphor. This is a Hail Mary pass. You throw it down the field. You hope it bounces.
I have no idea what you mean by this point. I'm not going to lie. China is all about profits. Chinese companies are all about profits. They're not different for some reason. BYD can sell cheap cars because the government developed a cheap supply chain. It's not because they're anti-profit. No. My point is, America also heavily subsidizes all of its key sectors. Why is it that America cannot demand lower profits in return for heavy subsidization, whereas China can? Because the Chinese government, let's say, wants to enter by force European car markets. Okay, they want to destabilize the European car markets. America can't do that with Ford in the way that China can do that with BYD. That's my argument. They can say, yeah, you're gonna take a much narrower profit margin when you enter the European marketplaces. Okay, subsidies just replace profits in ways the U.S. won't. That's not true. Subsidies always replace profits. Subsidies also play a role in the profit margins for American manufacturing. What are you talking about? That's what a subsidy is. A subsidy is supposed to make it cheaper for you to produce the good. My point is, BYD can't go, we're going to erroneously increase the price of these markets because they are still operating at the behest of the Chinese government's directive there. Whereas when America does this, it's basically the thing that I describe all the time. In China, the government controls the corporations. In America, the corporations control the government. It's that simple. So when Donald Trump is making initiatives like this, he wants by force for European markets and all these other countries to, by force, purchase American manufactured goods, even if they don't have any need for it, even if they don't want it. They want to fix the trade deficit by force. This is how they want to do it. And in that process, they will never tell the corporations to actually eat away at their profit margins. They will never do that. Do you understand? Whereas China will be like, yeah, no, you're going to have lower profit margins, but this is important for us because we want to enter these marketplaces and destabilize with predatory pricing, what you would consider predatory pricing, in the same way that like Amazon does. Think of China like Amazon. That is what I'm saying. You're agreeing with me. Aren't tariffs a way to increase taxes in an obfuscated way? It's not even an obfuscated way. It's directly what it is. Tariffs are an entry fee paid for by the importer. It's fine to have lower profit margins. The companies are so tied to the broader market. I just don't understand the framing of saying Chinese companies don't care about profits, unless I'm misunderstanding. Chinese companies don't care about profit margins, not profits, profit margins, because they are still operating at the directive of the government. And as long as the government has an interest in entering these marketplaces with much more affordable alternatives, they will follow suit, because it is not operating in the normal capitalist dynamic. Companies are not operating in the way that capitalist corporations operate in the United States of America and in the Western world. That's it. And if you don't recognize that, then you can't understand what the f is going on, or how China got to the place that it got to, or the moves that they make. This is no different than looking at ghost cities and being like, lol, these guys just want to improve their GDP by building these stupid ghost cities. And then you go, oh my God, it turns out they weren't ghost cities. Turns out there's people living there now. It doesn't make sense in the short term because you're operating with narrow thinking. You're operating within a capitalist framework. For China and the Chinese state, all they care about is the interests of China. And for them, they will use capitalism to their advantage. That is what they do. And using capitalism to your advantage means that you're not gonna work on maximizing profit. You're gonna work on maximizing market dominance. Governments like the CCP have complex multivariable goals and interests. Companies only care about growth and profit. Because the CCP controls its companies, they can operate with a more long-term minded objective than companies here in America are capable of. Exactly. Therein lies the problem with capitalism. It forces everyone to engage in short-term thinking because you only think in quarterly earnings. This is why I joke and say, American capitalists think in weeks, but the Chinese government thinks in decades and centuries. And it's ironic because in times of need, the American government has actually operated with central planning in mind, whether it be World War II and the economy that the manufacturing output that existed, the manufacturing base that was developed because it was a necessity, and how much that yielded tremendous bounty for America in general in the direct aftermath of that. Or even DARPA creating the internet. These are all heavily subsidized, publicly funded initiatives, and it required multiple decades of failure and tremendous amounts of money to be thrown at this project. All technological innovation that has accelerated humankind in really meaningful ways have only come from the public sector for this reason, because you have the opportunity to fail over and over again because you have a larger project in mind, whether it is obviously an invention that will allow you to surveil people better, or any number of different things like the space race. A lot of things, we misunderstand a lot of things that China does in the West because we think like, oh, this doesn't make sense from our narrow focus. We look at it and we go, why would they build high-speed rail like this? It's it's just, you know, it's not profitable. It's going to collapse eventually because it's not supposed to be profitable. That's not the only measure of building out a network that is self-sustaining. You know what else is not profitable? Our highway system. But we built it anyway, and we built it for cars. You know what else is not profitable? The U.S. Postal Service. But it's not supposed to be profitable. It's supposed to be a service. How, in your view, is China distinct from post-war Keynesian consensus besides the more government control over corporations? That's a key factor. And also, no private ownership in that regard. Even if it looks like a private ownership exists on paper, that gives a lot of opportunity to the government. That gives a lot of movement to the government.
This is into your team's hands, but that's all it is, a long shot, and it's a sign of how troubled the American economy now is.
China as a one-party strongman-led country is limited. Once the leader dies, the future is uncertain. This is also wrong. For every other country that has been led by a single-party strongman, you're not wrong. A great example of this is Chavez. Okay? Look at Venezuela now. China, on the other hand, does not have the same issue. While, yes, Xi Jinping is a singular, charismatic strongman force, the Communist Party of China is not as narrow-minded. And the only reason why I say this is because I look at the history of Chinese development over the past couple of decades. There is a unified vision. And while some leaders might move the country in a different direction, the party itself is in control. And the party itself gets their notes from bottom up. Sure, there is still centralized command at the top of it, but they're constantly getting endless amounts of feedback from this vast network of local representatives that get together and make demands that are directly what the people that voted them into positions of power want out of them. There is a robust party infrastructure to replace Xi Jinping. Ultimately, the Chinese government and the Chinese party, input is not power. The people need bargaining power. Dude, look, man, that's great. I don't disagree with you, but input is power. First of all, you're wrong about that. And secondly, it's hilarious to say this from any Western country. Go ahead, give your input and feedback to your administrators and see how well they listen to you. I'm about to go to the streets of D.C. in 2 days to represent the wishes of the broad majority of Americans that want this endless faucet of money and destruction that is going to Israel to stop, to be put to an end. Do you think they'll listen? It's been 1.5 years. Have they listened? No. What do you mean?
If you can put this in the bigger picture, talk about the tax cuts and how they fit into.
The majority still supports Israel. That's an incredibly vague statement to make. Supports Israel how? It's not. The overwhelming majority of Americans wanted a ceasefire. Joe Biden literally wanted Israel to continue doing death and destruction so much that he dropped the ball spectacularly. Kamala Harris followed suit and lost the election. You're going to tell me the majority of people aren't brainwashed? No, they're brainwashed in different ways, but they're brainwashed into thinking that, for example, American liberal democracy represents their interests. Good luck getting a robust socialized healthcare network, you know?
To the tariffs, what is it, something like $4 trillion in tax cuts and who benefits? And then talk about the other issues that President Trump keeps saying that they're not going to touch, even though what many call his co-president, Elon Musk, whether he steps back from being, giving speeches or not, going after Social Security, issues like Medicaid.
Let me start with the tax issue. The biggest single thing that Trump did in his first presidency was the tax cut of December 2017. And when that tax cut was written into law, it had a sunset. It expires this year, 2025. If that expiration is allowed to happen, corporations and the rich, who were the big beneficiaries back then, will face a big tax cut. He doesn't want to do that because that's his base, that's his donor support. He doesn't want to have those taxes go back up. Well, then what is he going to have to do? If he keeps on spending and he doesn't let those taxes go back up, he's going to have to borrow trillions, as we have been doing. He doesn't want to be the president who keeps borrowing trillions, in part because the rest of the world is a major creditor of the United States, and they're not going to continue to do it the way they have. So he's in a jam. He has to do something. So his hope is to savage the expenditures in this country. Look what he's doing. Mr. Musk stands there with a chainsaw to give us the clear implication, I'm going to solve the problem on the backs of the working class. I'm firing them all. I don't care what the rest of the working class suffers. I'm going to fire all these people without notice, without plan. Calling this efficient is a silly joke. An efficient process takes time, takes experts. You're not doing that. You're just wholesale firing. Calling that efficiency is an attempt to fool people that shouldn't make any difference. Mr. Trump is now in a jam. He can't get out of this without in some way solving the problem that has been built up. And there is no way other than the one he's doing, because it's the last gasp of how to take away from the mass of the people.
Read my last comment. China operates under different incentives, but is definitely often not long-term. I disagree with that statement. It is the most significant difference. Unless you think that, look, there's only two things that you can make assessments on here. Either Xi Jinping has the heavens mandate, okay, and he lucked in to all of this, and the Communist Party of China also has the heavens mandate, and they lucked in to this level of development and rapid urbanization, or they actually are keeping long-term interests in mind, especially in comparison to the United States of America that doesn't even make yearly plans. They make plans quarter by quarter, as opposed to 15-year plans they're trying to implement. No, I agree they have benefits, but often they build cities and infrastructure for the sake of having jobs for people. Wait, what? Yeah, okay. I don't know how to respond to that. Not only are you describing long-term plans and that benefit in the short term as well, but you're objectively wrong. I just described the concept of ghost cities. It's ridiculous. It's not real. Ghost cities are not real. They become real cities. Saying that in 2025 is kind of silly. They look like ghost cities because they're urban planning 5 to 10, if not 15 years ahead. Stop eating and talking at the same time. I'm not eating and talking at the same time. I'm not eating at all. What are you talking about?
The ability to borrow. I mean, let's be honest. If you put a tariff, you make everything coming in from abroad more.
In half an hour, I'm going to have Congressperson Greg Kazar from Text 35 on the broadcast. We're going to talk about the tariffs. We're going to talk about the future of the Democratic Party and how the Democrats must fight. Just letting you all know.
Expensive.
And then we'll continue this coverage.
That means
today.
People will buy less of it. They'll shrink their standard of living. If American companies take advantage of the tariff, which they always do by raising their prices, that will also hurt the working class. You are immiserating your workers in order to try to solve the problem you haven't solved before. But here's the irony that may in the end come back to haunt us. Europe has been unable to unify under the umbrella of American alliances. The enmity of the United States is bringing Europe together better than the alliance was able to do. And as you pointed out, very important, China, Japan, and South Korea, with long histories of animosity and tension, are getting together to cope with this. Wow, we are.
All right, well, I'm moving on from this. Hasan Reactions is one of the best ones in the React channel.